Hi everyone, hope you're all doing really well and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I'm continuing with the Cheetah for part 3 of this sped up tutorial. You can access the in-depth version over on my Patreon, where I'll talk you through more kind of advanced coloured pencil techniques. I'll leave the link to my Patreon below in the video description. If you want to go back and watch part 1, I'll leave the link below so you can draw along from the beginning. So carrying on then, I'm starting with a base layer of the buff titanium, which is actually a luminance pencil. I'll be using a mixture of Caran d'Ache luminance pencils and Faber-Castell polychromo pencils, and I'm going to be working on hot press Fabriano Artistico paper. Luminance pencils actually provide a really smooth base to work on top of because they're predominantly wax based. Going in with a light pressure using the Warm Grey 4 polychromo pencil, I'm mapping out all those spots and kind of darker patterns in the fur. You always want to make sure that you're shading in the same direction as the fur to start building up that texture from the very beginning. With the raw Umber 10% luminance pencil, I'm adding a layer over that buff titanium and merging the edges of the darker patterns with the surrounding fur. Subtle undertones like the beige red, the olive brown 10% and the cream can actually show through from underneath and brighten or kind of warm up areas of the fur. So it's quite important to include those subtle undertones because it can just really add a sense of depth to your portrait. I'm defining those dark spotted patterns using the dark sepia with a medium pressure. This is the darkest brown colour that the polychromos do. You then want to start building up the mid-tones, which is actually the main body of the work. This is where you can bring in those rich gingery colours which should blend quite nicely with those base layers. You want to keep the fur looking really soft by ensuring the edges of each tuft of fur is kind of merging with the fur around it. And incorporating some vibrant colours can actually really help to capture the lighting in the fur that's like bouncing off the fur and just give it that sense of depth. Particularly the green gold, the brown Pablo pencil, the Van Dyke brown, and just a few others will give the fur more of like a rich gingery tone. You can blend these layers with a paler colour like the light beige to start smudging the pigments into each other so the fur looks like more blended and it all just merges together nicely, particularly at the edges of those patterns or spots. So at this point you want to focus more on the details, so I'm using a dark sepia again to define the spots in the fur, continuously drawing it in back and forth motion so the edges of the patterns merge with the surrounding fur. It helps as well if you have a pinpoint sharp pencil so you can draw in those individual darker hairs as well. You can almost do kind of little squiggles that overlap to just create more of that kind of fuzzy fur texture above the eye. I'm then going in with a variety of colours just to add some subtle tints here and there to emphasise that realistic element. You want to make sure that you've captured the lighting in the right places, and you want to squash down the tooth of the paper to make everything completely smooth and eliminate the grainy texture from the paper surface underneath. Using a sharp black polychromo, I'm working into the darkest areas of the cheetah to increase the contrast and add depth to the fur. I'm also adding individual wispy kind of random hairs throughout the fur, being quite delicate with it and making sure that the lines are really fine, but you almost want to kind of flick out at the end of each pencil stroke to create that wispy feel to each hair. The refinements are all about pulling out those highlights to brighten up areas in the fur and add extra hair details and whiskers. To do this, I use the craft knife slice tool, which has a ceramic blade at the end which can be used to lightly scrape away those top layers to reveal the paper underneath. I also like to use the fine nib Uniball Posca pen in white just to kind of dot in those tiny bright white specks of highlight, especially around the eyes. So I hope you enjoyed this shorter snippet of the full-length advanced tutorial that's over on my Patreon. Like I've said before, I'll leave the link to my Patreon in the video description below if you want to have a go at any of my animal-based colour pencil tutorials focusing on realism techniques. Please also remember to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel to see more. Thank you so much for watching.